When Mehmed I emerged victorious from the Ottoman interregnum in 1413, he didn't inherit a glorious empire. He inherited a broken machine. The decade-long civil war had not only shattered the political unity of the Ottoman state, but had devastated its administrative backbone and military structure. Once a model of centralized governance and efficient military command, the empire had devolved into a web of local power struggles, tribal favoritism, disloyal officials, and undisciplined soldiers. Provinces collected their own taxes. Commanders followed regional lords instead of the sultan. The treasury was empty, the records in chaos, and the once proud Janissary corps weakened by political interference. If the Ottomans were to survive, Mehmed I had to do more than reclaim land. He had to rebuild the state from within. What followed was one of the most important and underrated phases in Ottoman history, the reconstruction of administrative power and military discipline that would fuel the rise of an empire for centuries to come. Mehmed's first challenge was administrative. After years of fratricidal conflict, many regional governors had begun acting like autonomous rulers. They collected taxes independently, ignored central directives, and built private armies. Mehmed I's first task was to reassert control over the Beylerbeys, the provincial governors who were supposed to serve the sultan directly. He summoned them to Edirne, where he personally revoked the appointments of those who had shown disloyalty during the interregnum. In their place, he installed officials who were not just loyal, but competent men who understood that the survival of the empire depended on unity, efficiency, and law. To enforce this, Mehmed revived the imperial bureaucracy, the core administrative engine of the Ottoman state. He reinstated centralized tax collection, created new positions for record keepers, and ordered a complete review of land holdings across the empire. This was not just paperwork, it was power. By documenting who owned what land, how much tax was due, and which households were responsible for military service, Mehmed restored the flow of resources back to the capital. These land surveys, known as Tahrir defters, became the basis of a more accurate, enforceable taxation system, one that ensured fairness, consistency, and most importantly, loyalty to the central state. Alongside this, Mehmed implemented a strict chain of command within the administrative hierarchy. Each official was accountable to the one above, with clear lines drawn between duties. Local judges, military officers, and civil administrators had their roles redefined and reaffirmed. Conflict of interest was rooted out. Officials could no longer hold both judicial and military authority, reducing the corruption and power abuse that had flourished during the Civil War. Through these administrative reforms, Mehmed transformed a scattered kingdom into a functioning bureaucratic machine. But rebuilding the government was only half the equation. The other half, arguably the most urgent, was the restoration of the military. The once feared Ottoman army had splintered during the interregnum. The Janissaries, formerly the elite infantry of the empire, had become politically entangled and lost their discipline. The Sipahi, provincial cavalry who held land in exchange for military service, had either deserted or pledged loyalty to rival claimants. To reclaim military power, Mehmed had to overhaul recruitment, restructure command, and re-establish the Sultan's control over every sword and spear in the empire. He began with the Janissaries. Rather than disband them or rely solely on brute force, Mehmed restructured their leadership. He replaced corrupt agas, their commanders, with experienced veterans who had remained neutral or loyal during the Civil War. He reinforced a code of conduct, reinstated rigorous training routines, and returned the Janissary corps to its original purpose: elite soldiers of the Sultan, answerable to no one else. Promotions were no longer awarded for politics, but for merit and battlefield skill. The Sultan personally attended military drills in Edirne, signaling that discipline and excellence would once again define the Ottoman army. Mehmed also reinstated the devsher system, a process by which young Christian boys from the Balkans were selected, converted to Islam, and trained for military or administrative service. While controversial by modern standards, the system created a loyal, professional class of soldiers and civil servants who owed everything to the Sultan. It ensured that the military remained independent of tribal loyalties and regional politics. These recruits formed the backbone of the reformed Janissary corps and the state bureaucracy men who were shaped not by family lineage, but by imperial training and merit. The Sipahi cavalry, too, saw sweeping reforms. Mehmed restructured the Timar system, through which land was granted to cavalry officers in exchange for military service. During the interregnum, many Sipahis had stopped reporting for duty, while others had seized additional land beyond their grant. Mehmed sent survey teams to review every Timar, revoking those that had been abused and redistributing land fairly. He also instituted military readiness checks, requiring regular drills and ensuring that each Sipahi had the horses, armor, and men he claimed. These measures restored the effectiveness of the Ottoman cavalry, turning them once again into a dependable arm of imperial warfare. Crucially, Mehmed recognized that administration and military strength were intertwined. A strong army needed a strong logistical base. So, alongside military reforms, he invested in infrastructure. Roads and bridges damaged during the Civil War were repaired. New supply routes were charted. Fortresses were rebuilt and stocked. Barracks were upgraded. This investment ensured that the army could move quickly, communicate effectively, and respond to threats without delay. The rebuilt infrastructure also served economic purposes, helping trade resume and increasing state revenue, which in turn supported further military expansion. At the heart of all these reforms was a simple principle: centralization of power under the Sultan. Mehmed had seen what happened when regional leaders grew too powerful, when military commanders acted as independent warlords, and when state institutions were left to rot. His reforms aimed not just to rebuild the empire, but to ensure that no future civil war could ever again bring it to the brink of collapse. Every reform, every appointment, every restructure was a step toward creating a unified, resilient, and disciplined empire. By the time Mehmed I passed away in 1421, the Ottoman administrative machine was humming again. Tax collectors were collecting. Judges were judging. Governors were governing. And the army, once scattered and demoralized, stood ready for battle under a single banner. The foundation was solid. The empire was strong. And the legacy of these reforms would stretch far beyond Mehmed's lifetime. When Mehmed I died in 1421, he left behind more than a reunited Ottoman state. He left behind a system, a carefully designed, efficiently running machine built on structure, loyalty, and foresight. The reforms he implemented in both administration and military institutions were not only for his own time. They were a blueprint for the future, enabling his successors to expand the empire, govern vast territories, and maintain control for centuries. The strength of his legacy is not measured in battles won or cities taken, but in the lasting frameworks that allowed the Ottomans to rise from internal chaos to imperial supremacy. One of the most powerful outcomes of Mehmed's administrative reforms was the stabilization of provincial governance. His restructuring of the Beylerbey system meant that each province was now governed by officials directly accountable to the Sultan. These governors, known as Beylerbeys, no longer operated as semi-independent rulers but as disciplined executives within a national hierarchy. The Tahrir defters introduced during Mehmed's rule were maintained and expanded, creating a consistent method for tax collection, land distribution, and census taking. This allowed the Ottomans to track resources, enforce laws, and monitor population changes across vast distances, a remarkable achievement in the 5th–10th century. Mehmed's emphasis on separation of powers between military leaders, civil officials, and religious judges helped prevent power monopolies. This balance reduced corruption and made the administration more predictable. Over time, it allowed the Sultan to manage an empire that stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates without needing to micromanage every province. Local officials followed standard procedures, enforced imperial law, and provided regular reports. This system was later refined by Mehmed II and Suleiman the Magnificent, but its foundation was laid by Mehmed I, who turned a chaotic state into a governable empire. Equally important were his reforms in justice and law. Mehmed reinforced the role of qadis throughout the empire, giving them authority in local disputes, while ensuring they remained separate from military command. He provided funding for court buildings, ensured the qadis received proper training, and required them to submit rulings to the imperial court when necessary. This created legal consistency across the empire, helping maintain order without the constant need for military intervention. Justice became not only a matter of religion, but a pillar of imperial control, ensuring that subjects, regardless of background, could rely on law rather than local power brokers. In the military domain, Mehmed's reforms reshaped the Ottoman war machine from a fractured group of personal militias into a centralized professional force. The restored Janissary corps, now based on merit and discipline, would go on to become one of the most formidable infantry forces in the world. The training programs, chain of command, and loyalty to the Sultan that Mehmed had reintroduced allowed his successors to field an elite guard that would not only win wars but also maintain internal order. The devsherm system, streamlined under Mehmed, became a permanent fixture of Ottoman recruitment for generations, ensuring a continuous flow of talent into both military and bureaucratic ranks. His restructuring of the Sipahi cavalry also paid long-term dividends. By enforcing accountability within the Timar system, revoking abuses, and redistributing land based on service, Mehmed ensured that cavalry officers were both incentivized and obligated to serve effectively. These mounted warriors formed the backbone of the Ottoman field army, capable of rapid deployment, efficient communication, and overwhelming force in open battle. Their dual role as tax collectors and local military leaders further embedded them in the empire's governance structure, creating a fusion of civil and military administration that gave the Ottomans immense flexibility. One of the often overlooked aspects of Mehmed's reforms was their psychological impact. After years of civil war, many citizens had lost faith in the idea of empire. The Ottomans had seemed like a collapsing house, strong in appearance but hollow inside. Mehmed's reforms changed that. As roads were repaired, markets reopened, taxes became fair, and soldiers stopped looting villages, people once again believed in the state. Loyalty to the Sultan became more than just a matter of fear, it became a rational choice, reinforced by good governance, legal protection, and economic opportunity. The economic boost from Mehmed's military organization was another long-term benefit. A stable military allowed for safer trade routes, reduced internal theft, and lower costs for garrisoning troops. Cities along the Silk Road, such as Bursa and Edirne, saw renewed growth. Merchants returned, markets flourished, and the empire's tax revenue increased. With a reliable stream of income, the Ottomans could afford larger campaigns, support public works, and attract scholars, architects, and engineers. The military no longer drained the state, it empowered it. These reforms also made possible one of the most ambitious Ottoman goals, imperial expansion. Mehmed's son, Murad II, inherited a functioning military and administration. He didn't need to rebuild the empire, he could grow it. With a disciplined army and loyal provinces, Murad II was able to confront the Crusaders at Varna and expand Ottoman influence in the Balkans. Later, Mehmed II would take this foundation and achieve the greatest symbolic victory in Ottoman history, the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. That conquest was not just a triumph of military strategy, it was a result of years of preparation and reform under Mehmed I. Indeed, Mehmed I is often overshadowed by the more flamboyant figures in Ottoman history. His name does not evoke the same drama as Mehmed II or Suleiman, but his impact is foundational. He rebuilt the skeleton of the state, giving it structure, resilience, and the capacity to grow. Without his reforms, later conquests might have collapsed under their own weight. Without his reorganization, the Ottoman Empire might have remained a regional power instead of becoming a global one. In the long view of history, Mehmed I's reign represents the pivot point between survival and greatness. He took the broken parts of an empire and fitted them back together, not in haste, but with care. His emphasis on records, hierarchy, training, discipline, and accountability transformed a crumbling dynasty into a sustainable state. His vision stretched beyond his lifetime. He didn't just rule an empire, he rebuilt its foundation, brick by brick, law by law, soldier by soldier. By the time his grandson stood before the walls of Constantinople, the tools needed to succeed were already in place. Mehmed I had seen to that. His legacy is not written in marble or conquest, but in systems, discipline, and stability, the quiet architecture of lasting power.